Our final speaker this morning is Alex Simons. Alex is the Corporate Vice President for Microsoft's Identity and Access Management business. He's a consistent proponent of open standards. He's graced this stage on a number of occasions. He recently took a sabbatical to coach volleyball. I think he might tell you a little bit more about that when he comes on stage. But we're delighted that he came back from his sabbatical just in time to join us again this year. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alex Simons.
Hi everybody, I'm Alex. I love coming to Identiverse. It's always one of my favorite events of the year. You can learn so many new things about new technology, so many things about emerging open standards, but the thing I love about it the most is the people. There's just no place else where you can meet so many interesting people from so many different backgrounds, all interested about the same kinds of things. And if I can get a slide deck up, it'll help me too. Can someone backstage help me and bring up my slide deck, please? Here we go. This is why I love coming to Identiverse. Where else can you spend hours and hours talking about identity standards, learning all about the latest technology, where you can see amazing keynotes like we just saw, for instance, from Andrew. I'm a huge passkey fan. We'll talk about that. But in addition, as Andy was just saying, I'm a huge volleyball geek. If I'm not working on identity, I'm coaching volleyball. I love to coach volleyball. And I was super curious, like, hey, is there any overlap? Like, if you look at the Venn diagram here, is there an overlap between these identity geeks, between identity geeks and volleyball geeks? And the good news is that yesterday I had a fabulous time talking with a friend from Signal, Dustin, who I just met. It turns out Dustin was played on the USC men's volleyball team. He and I had a great time, spent half an hour going back and forth between a really great conversation around real-time session withdrawal and how do you deal with hackers, and also the fact that it's a tragedy that there are only 4.5 full-time scholarships for men's volleyball. Where else in the world could you have that kind of conversation than here at Identiverse? It's just a fabulous place, and I'm so glad to get the chance to meet with all of you here today. So what I want to do is start out and bridge back to my talk last year where I pointed out, hey, we're moving into a very new world, and we really need to think about our identity systems differently than we have in the past. Traditionally, we have thought about a world where identity was kind of an enterprise control plane almost, or maybe it was a service that large consumer services used, like Google and Facebook and things like that. But now we need to really think about a world where more and more identity is infused into everything. In fact, Ken's previous talk that we just saw really drives home the importance of getting really good secure identity infused into everything the right way. And increasingly, the world is interconnected with all of our devices, all of our companies, all of our people. We need to make sure that we have a really good, much more kind of, I would call it, distributed model of identity than we've traditionally had. And it has to be trustworthy. It has to have built-in privacy and user control. It needs to be inherently multi-cloud and multi-device. It needs to have built-in really great detection and automated mitigations to be secure. But for me, the most important thing is it has to be based on open standards. Right? And so today what I want to do is talk about some of the amazing work that's happened this year in the open standards industry and highlight a few that I'm super excited about. But first, I just want to say, for all of you here, and in fact for all of the professionals around the world who spend a ton of time helping develop these open standards and getting them to market, I sure appreciate the work. You are making the world better. You are, as my mother would joke, you are doing the Lord's business. Thank you so much. There are 4 key areas, though, that I think are really both exciting work is going on, but are also super important for getting this identity trust fabric working. And I want to go through each of these. So the first is strong authentication. The next is a whole bunch of really interesting work on decentralized identities. I want to talk some about machine identities. I think it's particularly important, and it's a great follow-on to the discussion that Ken just had. And then lastly, let's talk about authorization policy and some of the challenges in that space. So strong authentication, this was an incredible year. After Andrew, as Andrew pointed out, after 10 years of investment, the last 12 months have been unbelievable in the strong authentication space. A year ago, I was highlighting how excited I was about the fact that Microsoft, Google, and Apple had all agreed to endorse passkeys, the latest version of the FIDO protocols, and that we were going to build those directly into our platforms. This year at World Password Day, hopefully you saw a ton of the coverage. It's happening, right? Like all of the mobile platforms, as Andrew was pointing out, now have support. Microsoft, of course, for Windows has had support for a long time. And we are finally at the point where passkeys and passwordless authentication can start to go mainstream for a broad set of consumers. So to help show some of the cool work that's happening here, I want to bring Robin Goldstein out. Robin is the partner director of product management on my team who is responsible for all of our UX experiences, but also drives our passwordless efforts.
Hey, everybody. Okay, let's hope everybody cross your fingers for live demo here. So thanks, Alex, for that introduction. And I'm just so excited that the platform support for WebAuthn is now basically everywhere on all the devices that you have. And one of the really cool things is no matter what device you are using, you have the ability to save a passkey now and have that work across all of the devices that you already have. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually take this is my off-the-shelf Windows 11 PC. For consumer, I've got the Edge browser from Microsoft that's built in, but I'm going to actually log into Google with the save passkey that I have in my Google Password Manager. And it's going to use Windows Hello. So here we go, logging into passkey, confirm it's really me, and here's what's really cool. It's just going to work with Windows Hello built into the operating system. Easy peasy. Super cool. So that's an example of the Google Passkey working with Windows Hello. Pretty awesome. Cool. Okay. Next thing I am going to show you, if we've got devices connecting. Let's see if I can get this one working for you. So I got my Google Pixel, and I am going to go ahead and let's see if I can get this working for you. I'm going to go ahead and log in to my Microsoft account. Maybe I'm not. Let's see if I can get the iPhone to do that for you. Let's see.
Do you want to bring up the iPhone on the screen here?
They are not in control. So.
Oh, like always, live demos can sense fear.
Yeah, there's always something. We'll get it. You saw me lurking around the stage. OK, we're going to get the iPhone now.
Here we go.
All right. So on my iPhone, I'm going to actually go ahead and sign into my Microsoft account. So this is now going to use the built-in support for FIDO2 and WebAuthn, and there I can just use the passkey stored in my iCloud keychain for a Microsoft account. So another example of devices working across the board. Yay! Okay. Okay. And last but not least, let's see, flying without a wire here. Let's bring this guy into view. I'm actually going to go ahead and log out. Let's log out of there. See if we can get this working. So we're going to go to, I'm just going to go ahead to xbox.com. Actually, I'm in the Chrome browser now. So just showing it works across the browsers and all the devices. So I'm going to go to the Chrome browser. Again, I'm going to try to sign into my Microsoft account where I have a passkey working with the account. And I am actually going to skip the Windows security. I'm going to skip the Face ID for the Windows Hello. And I'm going to go ahead and show you some work we have in progress on Windows where I can actually log in with my phone. So instead of having a security key, I can use the device I already have. I'm going to go ahead and use the passkey on this Android device and allow that to go forward. And that should log me into my Microsoft account. Fingers crossed. Oh, yeah, I'm going to use my fingerprint to get in. And there we go. Hey. I used my Android device to log me into my Microsoft account on Xbox.com in a Chrome browser on a Microsoft PC. That is the WebAuthn standards and FIDO and passkeys working across all 3 operating systems. We are so excited to be working with Google, Apple, and everybody in the FIDO Alliance to make the experience even better. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Robin gets the award for making it through the live demo. That's awesome. One of the reasons I was really excited to have Robin drive the strategy is I think, as Andrew was saying, we're really at a different pivot point now in the world of strong authentication. We really need to focus much more on getting the user experiences super smooth, making sure that this becomes the kind of thing that any consumer can use. So making sure that it's easy to transition from a password to a passkey, making sure that it's really easy to manage and keep track of all my passkeys. And then we have this ongoing set of work we need to make sure we're doing about making sure we have great user experiences, but also that in enterprise settings we come up with ways that we do support high assurance security requirements and that we have alternatives to syncing passkeys as well. So lots of work to do here, but the progress has been awesome. And if you haven't tried this yet on your phone, please do. It's so amazing. So next up, let's talk about decentralized identities and some of the cool things going on here. Now, decentralized identities, I think for a lot of people, looked like a technology waiting for a use case. But I think what we're seeing this year is that, in fact, it really is proving out to be able to do a lot of amazing real-world things. So first I want to highlight some work going on with the EU digital identity wallet use cases. These are broad-scale pilots working and very rapidly iterating on using VCs and verified credentials and decentralized identities to be able to fulfill these core sets of EU-identified scenarios. I think these are very cool. I also want to highlight that for us at Microsoft, hopefully you saw the news that we've now enabled LinkedIn to use decentralized identities with verified credentials. And so now you can use this to verify on LinkedIn that you actually are an employee of your company, and then working with our partner Clear to be able to verify that you actually are the human that you say you are. So this is a really cool use case, I think, of verified credentials to be able to improve the trustworthiness, for instance, of your LinkedIn profile. But I want to highlight for you probably the deployment in the world I'm the most excited about. It's so real, it's really neat. This is a customer called Cana Construction. They do like commercial development in Canada of very, very big buildings and facilities and stadiums and things like that. The challenge for anybody in this business is you have lots of people on site at a construction site. Some of them work for you, some of them work for subcontractors, and you have to make sure that they all have the correct set of certifications, health training, CPR training, things like that. They have finished up their safety trainings. They actually are, in some cases, they even have passed a set of health exams. And traditionally, they had to do this all with paper-based credentials. And then working with our partner, Credivera, they've been able to transition this completely to a digitized model using verified credentials. Let's take a look at this.
We're a large-scale commercial builder and utility infrastructure builder in the city of Calgary. We've been around for over 80 years. We started working with Credivera to enhance our safety program to get live credentialing of our staff on site. The old school version was people would show up with large stacks of paper. We'd have to sort through the paper, verify the identities and the certificates, and then allow them onto site.
Technology made it really easy for us to send documents and exchange information. But once it made that easy, it made it hard to actually verify who was sending you that information.
Ability to verify someone's, identity and the proof of competency digitally in a way that can't be counterfeited, I suppose, that's the problem they're solving for the world.
We produce verifiable credentials, whereby you receive a document and you can immediately determine its source and whether or not it's legitimate.
People are able to submit their documentations in advance, save us a tremendous amount of time on site, have them verified so we know people are coming to site with the proper credentials. We are also able to work with them to have live tracking so we know when people's credentials have expired and when they need to go for more training.
Technology created a problem and we created a solution.
There's really no added friction. There's really incrementally, there's virtually almost no added cost. It's that society has to make it important that we would invest in these solutions, and it will happen. I have no doubt about it.
So if you, like many people, maybe were a little skeptical about verified credentials and decentralized identity, I hope that helps maybe offset some of your skepticism. I just feel like that kind of real-world use case is just so mind-blowing, right? The ability to basically completely reinvent the way that you do digital certification and verification for your employees is just really amazing. I do want to highlight another area, though, that I think as a group of people interested in standards, we really need to continue to push on, right? Like, we need to get to a place where the same kinds of things that Credivera is helping Canada do for employees that we can do for pretty much every human on the planet with some kind of digital identity issued by their government. Being able to prove that you are a citizen of the country that you live in, and use that either in person, right? So I can go through the TSA, for instance, would be cool, but also being able to use that online so that I can prove, for instance, when I join a company that I really am the person who they're supposed to be hiring and not some hacker. So lots of work still to do here. I'm excited by the progress in many of these areas. I just want us to push really hard to see if we can't bring more of these together and create the simplest set of unified approaches that we can. So next I want to move on to an emerging area that's very much in line with what Ken was just talking about in the case of dolls and other scary things you might have in your home, which is machine identities. So let's fast forward to this future of the trust fabric. And maybe I've just purchased my iSmart Tankless 5000 water heater. Right? It's a smart water heater. It's connected, obviously, to the internet. I've purchased a maintenance and monitoring contract to go with it, and I want to be able to make sure that I can use it securely. I can get all of my maintenance done the way that I want. So the first thing, I want to be able to prove to the iSmart Tankless 5000 that I am the owner and I am an adult, and thus it will let me change the temperature of the water. Right? Like, I want to set the water at 120 degrees so my children can't burn themselves, right? But I don't want my children to be able to go up to the iSmart 5000 and move the temperature up, right? That could be dangerous. In fact, water above 140 degrees, you don't want that near your little kids. The next thing I want my tankless water heater to be reporting back to the manufacturer, hey, here's the state of how things are going. How efficient is it? Does it need any maintenance? Are there problems? And then when it has a problem, I want it to be able to notify the manufacturer and make it super easy for me to request the service that I've contracted for. Just here, like this idea, hey, let's just push one button. Next, when the service person shows up, I want to be able to, first of all, verify that they really are the service person that I was supposed to be sent out. So I'd like to be able to use their verified credential with my phone and prove, oh yeah, this really was the person who was supposed to come out. But then in addition, when they come out and they go to the water heater, I want the water heater to have the right set of authorizations so that they can turn on the diagnostics, they can turn on any kind of testing tools they need and things like that while they're there. But then, of course, I don't want them to be able to have those after the service is done. So with some ideas around some steps around how we make this whole scenario possible, I want to bring Evan Gilman, who's the maintainer of the Spiffy and Spire sets of standards and also the co-founder of Spiral, and then Peter Castleman, who's an identity standards architect on my team, up on stage, and they're going to talk to you about some of the work happening that's going to make this possible.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning. I'm Peter Castleman. I'm an identity standards architect at Microsoft.
And as mentioned, I'm Evan Gilman. I'm co-founder of Spiral and also a co-author of the CNCF graduated Spiffy and Spire projects.
All right. So, Kevin, now that we know about all the human identities in the story, what about the workloads? How are we going to identify them?
Yes, because certainly the story does not just stop at the humans. Those workloads can access all the same sensitive information that the humans are accessing. So it's really important that we apply least privilege to them as well.
Yeah, but that can be really, really hard, right? Because if you think about these workloads, they could be running in multiple environments. They can be running geographically distributed. They can be running in multiple clouds. I mean, did you know like 85% of our customers are now operating in multi-cloud environments?
It just seems like that happened so fast. It feels just like a few years ago that multi-cloud was considered a myth, but it's clearly not, and it's here today. And the good news is that Spiffy can help in these kinds of scenarios. SPIFFE is an acronym. It stands for Secure Production Identity Framework for Everyone. And it is a platform-agnostic workload identity solution, so it works regardless of what runtime or platform or technology your workloads are running on top of. And it also solves this identity credential bootstrap issue, which means you can deploy a workload anywhere, and then it can automatically come up without any a priori knowledge of its identity, without any kind of secret or anything like that, and automatically be issued an identity and use this to work to authenticate to other workloads and APIs and avoid the need for long-lived secrets.
Yeah, that sounds really neat, but how does that fit into our story here, right?
Right. I think we need to peel back the covers a little bit and have a look at what's going on. Right? So we have a couple services here power this whole experience. We have this front-end service, which presents the UX to the repair person. This may even be running on the water heater itself. And then behind it, we have this maintenance service, which powers that whole thing. Both of these are run by the field service department. But of course, it doesn't stop there. We also have this contract service that's run by the accounts department, and the diagnostic service that's run by the engineering department. And of course, they've all chosen to run these workloads in different places.
Yeah, so now the challenge here is, right, how do you apply zero trust principles in this scenario, right? How do you enforce least privilege?
Yeah, it can be hard to cross these kinds of boundaries, and so some of us are very familiar with how complicated these deployments can get. SPIFFE helps because it can perform both node and workload attestation to identify these running processes without the need for any prior knowledge, as I mentioned before. And then the result of this is that we can issue them these SPIFFE credentials in the form of X509 certificate or a JOT token. So now they can use these to authenticate to each other via MTLS, for example. And having SPIFFE on the bottom provides this consistent notion of identity across the entire system. So you can now have a foundation upon which you can build consistent policy and policy enforcement that doesn't change as you cross clusters and platforms and runtimes and things of this nature.
Yeah, so that sounds like a really excellent foundation for a multi-cloud zero trust story, right? We've got an identity for every workload, but as you and I have been talking, and through our collaboration as we've been exploring this space, we really need a little bit more, right? So let's go back to that repair person. So we actually do need to have the user identity at every point in the system, and then we need to be able to combine that with the workload identity and other contextual information in order to make these fine-grained authorization decisions, right? Because we want to ensure that only authorized personnel can run diagnostics and update the boiler, and we need to enforce that at every step of the way throughout this architecture, right? So now the question is, right, how do we do this? How do we propagate these identities in multi-cloud environments?
Yeah, that can definitely be challenging. And as I just think through this problem, I can see clearly that you need a lot of rich identity information at the request level at every step in order to do this kind of a thing. And you can really kind of feel how identity is truly everywhere in these scenarios. And so when I think about this particular problem, I can think of some ways to kind of implement it right, but they're far from standardized. And I feel if we can standardize the interactions between these different kinds of identities across call stacks and things like this, we could really accelerate progress here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think standards are key for accelerating progress, and this is why we've been collaborating, right? And really thinking about and exploring how can we connect the work in SPIFFE and the SPIFFE ecosystem to all the other standards work that we've done with OAuth and OpenID Connect and Shared Signals Framework, and just to name a few of those, right? And how can we bring it all together then, connected through standards in one place to get a single holistic view of your entire environment?
That's pretty cool. So personally, I find that stuff to be pretty exciting, but also very intimidating. There's a pretty big world of standards out there, and I mean, where would you even see us starting on this kind of work?
Well, I think for zero trust workload identity, we really need to start with figuring out how we're going to propagate user and workload identity. And then we're also going to need standards for managing policy, right? How we distribute, update, et cetera. And finally, we need to be able to also go and do the enforcement, right? And so we're going to need standards around that right at the edge.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. And as you can see, this is really incredibly powerful stuff if we can get this stuff to come together in the way that we have these dreams about. And so if any of you find this interesting, please do come talk to us. We still have a lot of work to do, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. And looking forward to all those conversations in the meantime. Alex, back to you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. So I'm looking forward to the day when I can sit on my couch and indicate that the service for my iSmart Tankless 5000 is complete, and know that all of the authorization for the technician has been removed from the tank, and he's locked out. Of course, I'm not looking forward to the day when my wife will be using the same technology to keep me locked out of her wine fridge. That's not such a cool scenario. So lastly, I want to talk a little bit about authorization policy. This is an area that in the standards world has just never really come all together in a way where you could say, gosh, I'm really happy with the progress here. You know, we have a lot of different standards and a lot of different ways to express policies. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about, well, why is this? Why is this so hard? Right? And look, there's a lot of differences between many different businesses. There's a lot of mismatched expertise, and what level you want to be able to author policy at. There's the complexity of industry-specific compliance requirements. There's a whole bunch of challenges with manageability. There's just sheer technical complexity, both in terms of it's a hard space, but also the number of resources and applications and models that you need to be able to support is really hard and really complex. And so I've been wondering to myself, well, maybe this is a space where we don't need a universal standard, and instead we should be thinking about it differently, particularly over the last 6 months with the rise of kind of the availability of large language models and really advanced sets of generative AI. I've been thinking a lot about maybe the approach in the authorization space should be much more based on using large language models than around spinning up another universal standard. We've done a bunch of experiments in my team to see what this would be like. So if you use the OpenAI technology, for instance, and here it is in our security copilot, for instance, you can ask it things like, hey, go write me an access policy and give me it in Rego, Azure RBAC, and in Cedar, for instance. And and OpenAI/ChatGPT will go out, it'll look at its base of things it's learning, it'll collect new skills if it needs to. We can always extend and add new skills in. And you get back, in fact, and this is not faked up, this is real, you can get back, for instance, here's the Rego, here's that policy written in Rego that I want for my water heater. You can see that as the owner, I'm allowed to set the temperature, and I'm allowed to set the timer on it. And then you can see it can do the same thing for me in Azure RBAC, right? So in the authorization language that we use in Azure, there it is. And it can do it in Cedar, which is the new authorization language from AWS, right? So a really interesting set of capabilities here to be able to move back and forth or express your policies in different policy frameworks without having to have a universal standard. The other thing I think is fascinating is that you can feed into these models a set of policy and ask it to tell you, okay, what the heck does this policy do? And it will give you back, here you'll see, in very easy human-readable format. It tells me, oh, this has been written in Rego. And then point by point, hey, what does this actually do? And then if I wanted to, it can even move it from Rego into Cedar for me, right? So this has really got me thinking a lot about, well, maybe we can avoid the traditional problem in the authorization space where, because there are 14 competing standards, we decide, let's spin up the 15th universal standard, right? And instead, maybe the right answer here is that we should be thinking about large language models almost as like the glue or epoxy that helps us build a consistent set of approaches for enterprises across all of these different policy models without having to come up with a grand unification scheme. Now, I'll be honest with you, inside my team even, we have debates about whether this is a good idea or not. I might be the only person who's convinced it totally is, but I've been thinking about it a lot, and we'll continue to push on this. I would invite all of you to think about it and see what you can make happen as well. I think it might be a better approach to authorization rather than trying to come up with the 15th standard. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Look, we're headed into this very exciting world of the trust fabric, of a much, much more kind of decentralized, distributed model for identity that will take different kinds of architecture and that needs to be built for the modern world and avoid many of the problems that Ken pointed out to us. We need to make sure that really good identity is built into all of our devices, all of our software, and that our people have really strong authentication factors all the time as well. With that, hey, what's next? Definitely, like Andrew said earlier, please, please, please support and adopt passkeys. I think now is a great time to plan for how you'll use VCs and decentralized identities. Those are not in the lab fantasy things anymore. They're becoming very real, and this year you'll see a lot more of that. And then finally, as you're thinking about your software and your devices, please make sure you're thinking about how you adopt zero trust architectures and that you do things with really great secure identity built in from the base rather than hacky security like we saw Ken talk about earlier. And with that, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.